Hey, this is the Hard Truths of Tony Schaefer, powered by 6 Hour Never Settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carry the best. I recommend you carry the best. Carry 6 Hour. For those watching, I'm holding my P220 carry Legion, which is one of my favorite carry weapons. 45 caliber, 45 ACP. Great weapon. It's what I carried a 45 as my initial carry weapon, undercover weapon. But when I was a very young operative, I highly recommend any SIG product. That's one of my favorites. So again, I think you should carry Sig Sauer, just like I did and do. Never settle. We're on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on the America Out Loud Podcast Network. Check us out. Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com.net. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and et cetera, et cetera. So today, for this episode of The Hard Truth, we're joined by Alex Traiman. Alex is the CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief of the JNS News. He's also directed a short documentary on Barack Obama and his relationship with the state of Israel back in 2012. He also serves as a media director and senior contributing voice at the Voice of Israel. He works with Emmett, which is an organization I've worked with before. Great work. So, Alex, welcome to The Hard Truth.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So, Alex, one of the reasons I've been looking to have this conversation, we're at the point right now that we're looking at Rafah. Rafah is going to be essentially the correct, I believe, as a military guy, the correct next step for military action relating to the ongoing operations of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF. But one of the things I note, and that's why I wanted to have someone who, you're actually in Jerusalem right now as we speak, who actually has both an on the ground, as in you're there, experience, and then someone who can actually have the ability to articulate the historic context of why this fight is important and how much the American people are being lied to by the American public. So if that's okay, we're going to jump right in.
Go for it. Let's do it.
All right. So fundamentally, one of the aspects of what we're talking about today is that there's an information war going on. Hamas, the Iranians, have all co-opted the United Nations and other international news outlets to carry their water. Am I overstating that, or do you agree with that?
Well, if you just look at what's going on with Hamas, you have numerous reporters and photojournalists from Reuters and CNN that came across on October 7th. They were part of the attack. You know, you have a photojournalist, there's a video of him on back of a motorcycle holding a hand grenade. Okay, so I don't think he was using that to take photos and send them to Reuters. And, in 2021, the last time we had a major flare up between Israel and Gaza, Israel bombed a building that was a Hamas headquarters, and then it drew international outrage because it was also the AP's headquarters. And we have also Al Jazeera that is collaborating with Hamas. So, the Hamas actually doesn't expect to beat the IDF, which is one of the world's most powerful, technologically advanced, battle-ready militaries, and Hamas just a terror organization. What they're doing is they on October 7th they committed an attack so large that they understood that the IDF would go into Gaza. And they hoped that two things would happen. Number one, they would start to kill soldiers in their booby-trapped territory, and then that loss would be so great that Israel would decide it wasn't worth the price and they would pull out. Or that number two, that the international outrage over killing Gazan civilians inside the territory would be so great that the international community, world powers, would pressure Israel to stop. And if Israel stopped in their tracks, then Hamas could wave the banner of victory. So the place where this battle is carried out is in the media and on social media, and they have their agents in order to take out that battle.
Yeah, we're on the same page, and it's frustrating as me being a member of the media here in the United States, trying to basically go against the mainstream media. And you mentioned Reuters, CNN picks it up, MSNBC picks it up, Fox News even picks it up to a certain extent. So it's been a very frustrating push to kind of say, yeah, it's not what they say it is. And let's hit that real quick, Alex. To me, that not only have they compromised their integrity, they've taken a side. They're not neutral. And you mentioned the guy with the hand grenade. Yeah, I think that you crossed the moment you put a hand grenade and you're playing for the team, you should be a target. Do you agree with that or not? I mean, to me, if you have a hand grenade and you're helping Hamas, that kind of makes you a combatant, right?
It absolutely makes you a combatant. And when you and when you look at it, it's not just the media, right? So every hospital inside the Gaza Strip is a command and control center for Hamas. So they're using the hospitals. Every mosque, every school. You have this organization, UNRWA, which is the refugee organization inside Gaza, where they take care of refugees that live in the same country that they claim to be refugees from, for their entire lives, and that refugee status gets conferred to the second, third, and fourth generations to perpetuate this refugee crisis. But they know that UNRWA workers also participated in October 7th. So it's a whole structure of using every civilian tool available as cover, and not just as cover, but even to participate inside the in the terrorism, but then to have a double standard on Israel. So when Israel attacks a journalist, or when Israel attacks a hospital or attacks a mosque that's being used to attack it, that then Israel's the bad guy.
Well, let's start that, because I want to go down that path. So I hear this constant drone of, this is genocide. It's not genocide. It's not genocide. I mean, there's 400 million Arabs. And I don't think the Israelis are going to have any interest in removing the Arabs from the face of the earth. It's like I roll my eyes every time it's like, what? They may talk in terms of disproportionate use of force. Like, is the IDF going to kick the ass of Hamas? Oh yeah, it's going to be bad. It is. But you can't say disproportionate use of force, which I would argue it's necessary, is the same as genocide. So how do they get away with constantly using this genocide term when it doesn't apply?
Well, the whole purpose of the Genocide Convention that Israel signed on to and all other nations signed on to was in the aftermath of the Holocaust, which was a systematic genocide of the Jewish people. The Genocide Convention is there to protect the Jewish people so another Holocaust wouldn't happen. Right. Now, you talked about using proportionate or disproportionate force. So first of all, disproportionate force has nothing to do with, okay, well, they killed 1,200 people and injured thousands of others on one day. So proportionality doesn't mean that Israel can then kill 1,200 people, and that's proportionate. Proportionality,
I'm with you.
Proportionality, relates to the specific targets that are military targets that Israel needs to take out. So when you have a terror army inside Gaza, which is Hamas, of 40,000 fighters that have over 30,000 Qassam rockets that they've been firing at Israel during this conflict, and they have a terror tunnel infrastructure which spans 500 miles underneath Gaza. It's bigger than the New York City subway system underground. So when you're attacking those terror infrastructures, so each attack has to be done with what's called proportionate force, not be disproportionate. Now, Israel has the lowest ratio in the history of modern warfare of combatants to civilians killed. At this point in the war, there's basically like a 1-to-1 ratio of civilian to combatant that loses their life. Honestly, militaries are going to be studying what Israel's doing as the gold standard for how to conduct operations. And it's an urban fighting environment in which Hamas is hiding among civilians. That the people that are firing at the IDF, they're not uniformed soldiers. They're dressed as civilians. So the fact that Israel's been able to keep this at a historic low, right? That no armies ever managed to achieve this low a level of this lower ratio, and yet Israel's being accused of a genocide.
I know.
It's a joke.
No. So to that point, look, I spent 30 and a half years in our military. I've had to fight in urban environments, and I can tell you from experience that is the most difficult environment to have to fight in. I mean, it's horrific. And yet, to that point, Alex, the IDF has been willing to sustain additional casualties they did not have to sustain by the fact they've been very precise, room to room, precision use of military force. Would you agree with that? They've been very precise. Even exposing their own soldiers to additional danger because they are trying to be so precise. I mean, it's completely lost.
And inside Israel, you have a lot of domestic pressure on the government saying, why are you putting our soldiers at risk?
I know.
It's not, in Israel, it's a citizens' army. Okay, so every single citizen in the entire country, it's a very small and tight-knit country where Like I personally know dozens of soldiers that are fighting in Gaza, and these are friends. Their husbands, their fathers of young kids. They're people's kids that we know are fighting in Gaza, and we value their lives. Like, we don't want even one soldier to die. Like, we don't look at them as like a cost of war. Like, each soldier that dies in Gaza is like a whole world to the Israeli people. So the idea.
No.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I went to high school in Lisbon, Portugal, and one of my classmates, Ruth Broder, was Jewish, was Israeli, and so she, back, this is a long time ago, but even then there was required military service, and God bless you, Ruth, if you're listening, but Ruth had to go do military service. She was a civilian soldier, as you mentioned, and I appreciate that. But let's move on to this other aspect of history, because I think we've clearly defined for the audience. Don't trust anything you hear in the mainstream media, because it's been essentially propagated for purposes of propaganda, not factual and correctly fact-based information to help people understand. But let's go back. You're sitting a place called Jerusalem, right? Jerusalem, that's the name of it?
The capital city of the state of Israel and the Jewish people for eternity. Yeah.
So when was that city named? A long time ago, right?
This goes back to the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and King David was king here, and Solomon built the temple here.
So the Jews have been there way longer than the Arabs and Palestinians, right? I mean, it's in the name, right? Am I right on this?
Judaism existed for thousands of years before Islam and Muhammad was ever born.
So this is my point. Like, I try to explain this to my progressive young friends. Oh, the Israelis are occupying Palestine. It's like, what are you talking about? Literally, the city, the names of the cities, especially with Jerusalem, goes back to literally the dawn of civilization. How do you not get that? And I don't understand how.
The county to the south of Jerusalem is called Judea.
Yeah.
Jews are called Jews because they're from Judea, right? And today, the international community, they don't want to call that county Judea. They call it the West Bank because they don't want you to know that's Judea.
I know.
And the people that want a two-state solution, what they want is a two-state solution that no Jews live in. So what they want is the only county in the entire world called Judea. They want it to be what the Germans called Judenrein, or Jew-free. So they want the ethnic cleansing of Jews to not live in the only county in the world called Judea.
I'm with you. So again, we're having a fact-based, people can check us out. They can check out what we're saying. It's historically accurate. What I don't understand, Alex, is how we have such a devotion to a false narrative by the progressive left. I think it's dangerous. I think it's not only dangerous, to your point. This leads to this whole fiction that the genocide didn't happen and all these other things didn't happen. It's like it did happen. And you all have the right of existence. You have the right to have your own country. Your country and the roots go back literally to the dawn of civilization. And I don't understand how men and women who consider themselves to be intellectually superior to the rest of us, which, just saying, they actually think they do, can think they can get away with lying so blatantly about, quote unquote, the Israelis occupying Palestine. How is this possible?
I mean, if you look at it, I mean, the progressives and the liberals that oppose Israel in this conflict, support Palestinians, is the ultimate irony. If anybody spends even 10 minutes in the state of Israel, they will recognize that Israel is one of the most liberal countries, not just in the Middle East, but in the entire world. And if they would just cross the street and go into the Palestinian dominated areas, they're the most regressive and repressive societies. And the progressives in America are siding with they wouldn't last 2 minutes if they were living in these Palestinian areas where they would be embraced in Israel and they would love it here. But they side with the wrong side. And that's part of this narrative warfare that the state of Israel is constantly fighting. And unfortunately, I would say that you in America, you've seen it time and again it's not just about the Israel issue. I mean, there's replacement theories that are being constantly advanced by progressives about America and its values, and the same thing here with regard to Israel and its values.
Well, so let's talk about that, because one of the targets of 7 October, and I'm glad you brought up the 7 October thing and what was attacked. One of the first targets that those aerial assault forces hit was this really cool concert. I'm I'm a libertarian, so I'm just like, you want to go out and party all night and get naked, you go do that, you go, girl. But this concert was one of the primary targets. And let me tell you, I saw the Shanty, I think was her name, all these poor young girls who were literally attacked and raped and worse. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, you have this liberal society, you can be gay or otherwise, nobody cares. But you go to the West Bank, you go to the Gaza Strip, oh boy, you can't be anything liberal, right? And so I don't understand how our liberals, our progressives here in the United States and around the world are so willing to pick up and support an extreme version of political Islam, which would go against the very values they promote. How do they circle that square intellectually?
Tony, you know what they would accuse you of doing when you just made that? They would say that you are pinkwashing the situation here. They have a term for that. You know, when you talk about how gays can live in Israel, that's called pinkwashing the situation. So there's progressive language to refute what you just did there, which is the truth. You know, that's how bad it is. When you point out the truth, they tell you that's wrong as well.
Well, tell me about the pinkwashing, because I did not know this term, but I want the audience to understand this, because
I mean that's what it is. You know, when you try to defend Israel by saying that homosexuals can live here in Israel and they can't live in Palestinian territories, that is what the progressives have termed pinkwashing. You're using the gays, and what that should be is called intersectionality, right? Because that you have that in America, but intersectionality doesn't apply to Israel. Okay, Israel's on the wrong side of intersectionality, so it can't intersect with any other minority group. Even though the Jewish people, you know, the state of Israel was founded from the ashes, on the one hand, from the ashes of the Holocaust, which was the worst genocide of modern history, systematic murder of 6 million Jews living in Europe. And then the second that the state of Israel was created, you had 850,000 Jews who were expelled from every country across the Middle East and North Africa, and they all came to Israel as refugees. So one of the worst mass ethnic cleansing of a people's. So that's how the state of Israel was founded, on the ashes of a genocide and an ethnic cleansing, and yet still, we're not even allowed to defend ourselves against a terror organization.
So this is where I'm walking this conversation. So first, let's finish with 7 October. Why is it that the Israelis have not just released that horrific video? And I don't want to see it, but I should, and I think everybody should see it. The Hamas own video. I mean, I've talked to people who've seen it. It's horrific. Why doesn't the Israelis just say, here's the video, go look at it, of that they've been showing to the media?
I mean, it's like a snuff video. It's terrible.
I know it is. I know.
I mean,
but I'm just saying,
I don't want to see it. You know, I've been down to the houses that were attacked in the kibbutzim in the south, and I've been to the site of the Nova Festival. I don't want to see that video. I don't recommend anybody see that video. You know, it's horrific. You know, so.
But it seems to me that the people aren't convinced it happened. That's my issue. It's like, you know, because they keep saying, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." It's like it was horrible. So that's my issue.
Unimaginable. And not only did it happen, but those videos that you're watching, yes, some of it comes from Israeli surveillance, and you know, obviously, we live in a world where there's cameras every place. But a lot of that footage came off of GoPro cameras that the terrorists were wearing because they wanted to document what they did, you know, which is, you know, unlike the Nazis who were a little bit embarrassed and they tried to cover up what they did. You know, Hamas wants everybody to see these videos. They want you to see what they did. They want you to see terrorism, because what happens is it creates copycats, and that's
of course.
So, you know, they want as many people as possible to see those videos.
So this brings me to my next question, which may be uncomfortable. Why does the Democrats? Why did high net worth donors who are Jewish in the United States continue to support the Democrat Party?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question. You know, I think that, you know, historically, you know, Jews many of whom came to America as immigrants, you know, either from Russia back in 1900s and after the Holocaust, that the Democrats supported them in these areas. They lived in these Democratic controlled areas, and so they just got used to it. I don't know. I mean, the cities Jews mostly live in urban areas, and the urban areas have stayed mostly Democratic. Like if you look at the map. So, I don't know if it's specifically a Jewish problem, but it's a good question because the Democratic Party, particularly since the administration of Barack Obama, made it their primary foreign policy objective to give money to Iran, as everybody understood that Iran was developing illicit nuclear weapons, funding and organizing terror proxies. And terror proxies all over the region. It's not just Hamas. It's also Hezbollah. It's also the Houthis in Yemen who are fighting and firing at Israel and commercial vessels and have taken over large parts of Iraq and Syria, destabilized all of southern. They destabilized the entire region through their terror proxies. And the United States, under Democrats, wants to fund these guys. And the Iranians are saying that the reason why they're developing nuclear weapons and creating this ring of fire around Israel is because they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So now, how any Jew in America could want to vote for these policies? I mean, it's not because they're Democrats. Like nobody here cares, who's a Republican, who's a Democrat. But
no,
how can you vote for anybody that would want to, put the state of Israel in existential danger? It's a big question.
Well, that's my issue because I don't know if you knew this. I worked for Dr. Herb London, a Jew. And I ran his center, the London Center for Policy Research. We worked with Emmett, like I said. He wrote a book on BDS. It's like he basically called out a lot of the folks he's friends with in New York about the fact that you have this BDS movement, which is literally back before the whole 7 October thing, was trying to undermine and essentially defund Israel, period, which was, to me, evil, stupid. But again, you have politicians who have essentially established a vocal and sustained support perspective on radical Islam. And I'm not talking about just Hamas. As you mentioned, there's the issues with the Shia. The Shia have been essentially the most, I think, active and violent because they're the ones helping organize Iran, being Shia, organize all of these militias against our interests, against your interests, You've got Hezbollah, you've got the Houthi, are all derivatives of this. And yet somehow, Alex, you have members of the Democrat Party, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, all these other folks who have become vocal, sustained supporters of this Islam, this political Islam. And so it's to the point now where I believe, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, I don't want to have you say something that you feel uncomfortable with. But it seems to me this is driven, that their activism and support for radical Islam is to the point where actual direct support to the Israelis by the U.S. government is now being jeopardized because Biden and his administration see that their support, the Tlaibs, the AOCs, are necessary for his reelection. And therefore, I would argue, because they are so focused on domestic politics, that is the Biden administration, they're potentially pulling support for the Israelis. What do you think?
Well, first of all, what you just did, that's what progressives would call Islamophobia, right?
I know. It's terrible.
But I think that this is a giant bluff. And I think that Israel has to be willing to call that bluff. First of all, for Israel, this war is existential. Okay, we have terror organizations that are not like thousands of miles away, like when the United States was fighting in the Taliban, in Afghanistan, or fighting ISIS in Iraq. Like these people walked across the border and murdered our citizens, because they lived right there. And we have Hamas inside Jerusalem also, and in Judea and Samaria, what everybody calls the West Bank. Like they're in our backyard, and they're already like inside our house. So and then you have Hezbollah. It's existential for us. But the idea that we're hearing that the reason why Biden can't fully support Israel is because of this progressive base, and they're threatening in places like Michigan that they won't vote for Biden if Biden sides with Israel. I have a hard time believing that, because I would have to imagine for progressives that probably don't know very much about the Middle East conflict, might not be able to identify Israel on a map, wouldn't be able to point out where the Israelis live versus where the Palestinians live and vice versa, that they have a lot of issues that they care about in 2024. And this one is probably pretty far down the list. So the idea that they would allow a Republican to become the president over this issue, I just don't buy into that. So, I think that Israel just has to keep doing what it needs to do and not allow Biden to claim that our existential issue is an election political football.
Well, I'm with you on that, Alex. You'll get no argument from me. So, but I'm not the one sitting in the White House, and I don't look like Jake Sullivan, just saying. So there you go. So anyway, we're going to have to take a break. We're halfway through The Hard Truth with Tony Schaefer, powered by 6 Hour. We'll be back after this break. Stand by. Hey, this is The Hard Truth. Tony Schaefer, part 2, still powered by 6 Hour. Never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. I still carry the best. I recommend you carry the best. The best is 6 Hour. Never settle. And then also a shout out to our friend Cherie Curry, chainsawchick.com. Cherie does our cover and bumper music. So Cherie, we love you. We always appreciate your supporting our show. And we are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on the America Out Loud Podcast Network. And of course, Project Sentinel is our home, projectsentinel.com.net. And we're on all the social media sites in the world, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, etc. So we're continuing with Alex Traiman. Alex is the CEO and the chief of the Jerusalem Bureau of the JNS News. And Alex, we've appreciated your clear and concise understanding of issues which your colleagues in mainstream media just don't seem to understand. It's a mystery to me how, they don't get it. So, but we are joined second half of the show by the resplendent Elizabeth Breckenkamp and the dishy Chris Cordani. So there you go.
That's right. A major pinkwasher here. There we go.
There you go.
Actually, I'm Italian, so I guess you call me a sauce washer, right?
That's right. Dishy is a real word. I do check these things out before I say them most of the time. So there you go. Dishy. So anyway, so Alex, we were just talking about kind of the direction of things. I have one last question I want to throw out to you, and I'll let the other folks jump in. So, what do you see coming? Because there's so much controversy about the fact that Netanyahu has said we're going to beat Hamas, and a lot of people are upset. It's like, oh my God, that's really strong language. But were just talking about this is an existential threat against your existence. So, why would you accept anything less than complete victory over a group who basically said we're never going to accept your right to exist? So, how do you see this turning out?
Right. And it wasn't a one-off either. I mean, Hamas has been firing rockets at Israel since 2005. People don't realize that Israel actually used to have civilians living inside Gaza. We had 8,500 residents in 21 Jewish communities. The military was inside Gaza, which enabled them to, quote unquote, mow the grass and take out terrorists when they would start to rise up. And what we got for that, for pulling out, was just years and years of terrorism, tens of thousands of rockets, and of course, October 7th. So, Israel is not willing to just, get to another ceasefire. Like, we had a ceasefire on October 6th. So this concept of just going into ceasefire and kicking the can down the road, the Hamas has openly stated that they would do October 7th again and again and again if they could. So for Israel, you can't allow that to happen. Any organization that says it, but more importantly, develops the means to do it, can't exist in your backyard. So, Israel has been, for the past 137 days, taking out Hamas, taking out their leadership, taking out their combatants, taking out their weapons stashes, destroying the tunnel network. And, according to the IDF, they've destroyed already 75% of the organized battalions, which means that you've killed or injured at least half the members of every single battalion, destroyed the control structure there. And there's 6 battalions to go. And they've moved very strategically from the north to the south. They're in Khan Yunis right now, which is a major city in the south. It's believed to be one of the remaining Hamas strongholds. And then after Khan Yunis is the southernmost city in Gaza, which is Rafah, which is along the border with Egypt. And now the problem is that because Israel's done everything that it can to reduce civilian casualties in the Strip, what they've done is they've told the civilians, as they started in the north, to go to the south and get out of harm's way. Well, now you have almost the entirety of the population of Gaza in and around Rafah. And of course, that's the reason why Hamas operatives and their senior leadership and also the hostages have been taken to that area to hide among all the civilians. So the United States and others are saying, well, Israel, you can't go in there because all the civilians are there. So they're making it that Israel has to come up with a plan to allow the civilians to get out, so that then they can go in, which on the one hand is helpful to a certain extent. You want it to be as least populated as possible when you go in. But at the same time, as civilians get to leave, who else is going to leave? Hamas operatives, senior leadership, and the hostages are going to get smuggled out too. And we know that that's the case because they were smuggled down to the south in the humanitarian corridors that Israel set up. So you get the sense that the U.S. and others want Israel to fight, but they don't want them to fully win. But you know what? I think that they do understand now the determination of Prime Minister Netanyahu and the IDF to go ahead and finish the job. And we saw this week that they vetoed a UN Security Council resolution brought by Algeria, which called for an immediate ceasefire. So the United States is not calling for that. They're somehow allowing Israel to do what they need to do, and yet at the same time they're also applying immense diplomatic and political pressure. And I think what you're going to see is that in the weeks and the months ahead, you're going to hear more and more talk about the recognition of a Palestinian state, which would be a horrific reward for the worst terror attack in the history of the modern state of Israel.
Have you thought about moving the Palestinians to Ukraine? I think they'd be probably comfortable there.
It's interesting that you say that, because the second that the war started in Ukraine, you had Ukrainians running to the border. They were flooding out into Poland, flooding out into Romania and everywhere else. And the big story was, well, who's going to accept refugees from the Ukraine? Even Israel took in about 35,000 refugees from Ukraine. Many of them weren't even Jewish. And yet here in Gaza, so Egypt doesn't want any Gazans to come in. Jordan doesn't want any Gazans to come in. And the United States and others are saying not one Gazan is going to leave. So basically, this is the only war in the entire world where the residents in the war zone are not given the opportunity to leave if they want to. And so you have to ask the question, does the international community actually care about the well-being of Gazans that desperately want to get out of that area, or are they just want to use them as a lever in order to pressure the state of Israel?
So let me be blunt. I'm not going to ask you this question. I'm just going to make it as a declarative statement. I know from talking to my contacts, who are the Sunni, the Egyptians and other Arab nations, they were convinced of the Abraham Accords and the wisdom there of opening up commerce and direct relationships with the Israelis. The Saudis are about to kind of to formalize that. And so I'm not asking you to comment, Alex, but I'm saying this. I don't think they want the Palestinians. They don't want them. They will not take them. And oh, by the way, I think they're quietly like kind of cheering the Israelis on to get this done, because the one thing that has stuck out and been a real hazard to bringing peace and prosperity to the Middle East, where the Israelis and Arab nations are working together, has been the Palestinian issue. President Trump, and I was there at the White House when, with Mark Meadows, by the way, when they had the ceremony. I wasn't in Jerusalem, but I was in the White House in D.C. with Mark and others watching the ceremony when President Trump decided to move our embassy to Jerusalem. The correct, he promised to do it. Other presidents promised to do it. He's the first one to follow through. And that's my point, Alex, is that I think that most recognize that there was real potential to bring, you're never going to have total peace. You're always going to have knuckleheads like the Islamic the Islamic Brotherhood. The ones in Egypt and all the other stuff. But there was a real potential there, and I think that that's why you've seen this. Yeah, the Arab nations will say something publicly, but behind the scenes, I don't think there's much support for Hamas at all. So just saying, I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's the
I
impression.
mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, people, they don't understand this because they don't understand Trump. But Trump, how did he understand the Middle East better than all of these State Department career lifers over there?
Yeah.
He understood two basic principles. He said, A, you gotta punish those that are malign actors, that are destabilizing the region, and you have to reward moderates that bring peace. And so, right. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized that Jerusalem's the capital of the Jewish state of Israel. He recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights in Syria, that it's controlled. And he punished the Palestinian Authority. He expelled the PLO mission from Washington, D.C. He shuttered a consulate which dealt directly with Ramallah, that reported to the State Department, that was in Jerusalem. He defunded the Palestinian Authority. He defunded UNRWA, which perpetuates the Palestinian refugee claims. He defunded UNESCO, that said that Jewish holy sites like the Cave of the Patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was a Palestinian heritage site. So he did all of this. And you know what happened? It was the quietest period in Israel in a long time, because the Palestinians understood that they would be punished for attacking the ally of the United States, which was the Jewish state of Israel. And then not only that, he turned around and he forged peace with all these countries. You had John Kerry, before he left, the Secretary of State, saying, no. You'll never have peace with the Arab states before Israel has peace with the Palestinians. And we proved that the exact opposite is true. All these countries, especially Saudi Arabia, they haven't gotten a thing from the Palestinians. The Palestinians don't offer America anything. They don't offer the Saudis anything. They just destabilize the region, and they're sick of them. And what was beautiful about this was that the Palestinians no longer had a veto over peace and moderation in the entire region. And the other issue was Iran. And the Saudis and the Emirates and the Bahrain, they're also afraid of an Iran that develops nuclear weapons. And because the United States was no longer a reliable ally for all of these countries, so these countries said, well, wait a second, who do we have? And they look around the region, they said, who has a military that can counteract Iran? That's Israel. So what the Saudis and others want and expect is for Israel to defeat Iran's proxies.
Exactly.
And if Israel does that, you're going to see very quickly normalization between Saudi Arabia and the state of Israel. But if Israel gives into international pressure and doesn't finish the job, doesn't defeat Hamas, doesn't defeat Hezbollah, allows Iran to continue on the track towards nuclear weapons, then what does Israel offer these countries? So they're hedging. They're just waiting to see what happens. And in private, they desperately want Israel to win this war.
Of course. Yeah. But by the way, speaking of John Kerry, he's gone. He left the administration. Did you know he's going off to Hollywood to film the Munsters remake? He's going to be Herman Monster with the big bolts coming out of his neck. I think it's a role of a lifetime for him. Just saying. So good luck, John. We look forward to seeing you all green with bolts.
He's a perfect fit. Yeah.
That's right. All right. So let me open it to my colleagues. I've bogarted, so to speak, the questions. So go ahead.
Oh gosh, there's so many things there. But Biden has said more than once, of course he mumbles a lot trying to read his teleprompters, but he has said repeatedly to Netanyahu to stand down, to think about it before you go in. He keeps basically, from what I have seen and read, he's ostracizing Netanyahu as if Netanyahu is dumb enough to actually listen to Biden and say, oh, you know what? Gee, Joe Biden's right. I guess I really shouldn't go in there and try to, send my Israeli Defense Forces and try to wipe out the rest of Hamas. The other thing is, you never hear Biden criticizing Hamas. He's only criticizing Israel. He's not criticizing Hamas openly. And if you follow really the chain of money, Biden has given money to Iran. We know that. And then Iran then turns around and funds Hamas. So Biden is saying one thing to Israel, but but behind closed doors, he's actually funding the attacks against Israel. I mean, it just seems crazy to me. What do you think?
Well, why would America pressure only Israel and not Hamas or Iran?
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah.
But there's a reason why. There's a reason why you only pressure Israel, because Biden, Iran and Hamas, they're not going to give in to the pressure, right? They don't care. So the only place where you can put pressure where you might see that side bend is Israel. And that's why they don't want Netanyahu as the prime minister. Now, you've heard them say that Netanyahu is an a-hole, is a bad effing guy. Hillary Clinton said 2 weeks ago that he's untrustworthy, he has to go. This is the democratically elected. This is a democratically elected prime minister of an ally. Okay, they're not saying like the mullahs in Iran have to go, or Mahmoud Abbas, who's in year 20 of his 4-year term, that he has to go. Right? They don't say that. They just say Netanyahu has to go. And the reason why is because Netanyahu opposes American policy of a two-state solution, okay, which no Israeli today wants.
It won't work. It's stupid.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
There was a very simple formula that Clinton brought in with Oslo, and a lot of people disagreed with this formula. They said it would never work, but the formula was so simple that a kid could understand it. It was called land for peace. Okay, Israel doesn't have a lot of land, but it would be willing to give up some of the land it does have if the Palestinians would deliver peace in return. Okay, simple formula. And now the Hamas, the Palestinians have given Israel the worst horrific barbaric massacre in history and a war, which is now lasting for 4 months. And the international community is turning around saying, well, no, they get the land. And in Israel, we're saying, what are you talking about? It was called land for peace, not war for land. Right. If you want to fight, if you want to win the land in a war, well, then let's fight for it. And whoever wins the war keeps the land. But that's not what they're saying.
Here's what's going on. You have Joe Biden and the administration, the European globalists are saying, well, after this war, when you guys take down Hamas, it will be, you can just walk back and say, okay, our bad. You can have Gaza back, whatever you want to do. By the way, for good measure, also take the West Bank. Yeah, Netanyahu's not going to go for that, and I wouldn't go for that if I were him. Only an idiot would go for that, especially after what they saw, and after Hamas was saying, "Well, you let us regroup, we're just going to go back and attack again." And if they don't do it, I'm pretty sure another Iran-sponsored group will do so. So that's an issue, and they know they can do it, or at least they have a very short window until after this coming election. That's what's going to happen, and it is, however, gentlemen and lady, about that time.
Tony's Takes.
For Tony's Takes. That's right. Tony's Takes is powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle. And I don't settle.
Never settle. Never settle. All right.
I don't settle for stupid questions either. I hope you don't, Tony. There you go.
You're the one with the question, so you can.
All right.
You can speak for yourself.
Tony, Alex, Elizabeth, New York's Attorney General Letitia James continues this long victory lap over the trumped-up Trump decision.
Yes.
Now she says she's going to take Trump's buildings if he doesn't pay or can't pay the settlement. Judge Meathead Engren, well, I mean, this guy, you look at this guy, he looks like Meathead when he grows up and doesn't balloon out 300 pounds. Different story. He enabled this by appointing a retired Clinton-appointed judge as a independent person in charge of making decisions to force Trump to divest or take the business's assets away.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do business in New York either. So you're right, Kevin O'Leary. But Tony, what's your take?
So I look forward to when they start seizing all the bogidas. Is that what Joe Biden calls them? Bogidas? Bogota? How does she pronounce it? Anyway,
bogidas. They're somewhere in Kiev, I think.
That's right, the Kiev. So no, it's no. They're going to start taking the bodegas and they're going to turn them into essentially Democrat National Committee offices. And this is the beginning of the end, because what they're going to do, Chris, is if you want a bagel, if you want a soda pop, you're going to have to basically put on a Democrat T-shirt and say that you're for Letitia James. It's going to be a big political operation.
Oh, yeah.
It's
here you go. Speaking of Meathead.
Oh, no. Let's just take it for a second. So, Alex, do you do? I don't want to get you into domestic politics, but everything kind of comes back to this. You know, they're trying to say that basically assessing the value of a building and then letting the bank decide if you're telling the truth or not by their own underwriting, that's bad, and that the
Yeah,
state
where's the
can now come in
crime?
and the state can now come in and say, yeah, we don't agree. We only think Mar-a-Lago is worth 18 million. It's like, what? I'm just
Well,
saying. I mean, I don't know
they
how
can-
you see that.
They
I
can
mean-
do this anytime. Alex, I want to throw this at you as well. Most places do this in America. They highball the value, and then they come to an agreement when the bank does its due diligence.
Yeah, of
Deutsche
course.
Bank agreed that Trump was doing the right, was valuing everything correctly. You see this from over there. What are you seeing? What's the sentiment over there about what they're doing to Trump all around here?
Well, what I would say is they're doing the same things here to Netanyahu that they're doing to Trump. And
Oh,
you're
I
seeing
didn't know that.
the criminalization
Oh.
of politics here, and you have trumped up charges against Netanyahu. He's been fighting corruption charges that would have amounted in mistrial at least 3 times, if they were being held in the United States.
Wow.
And the reason why they do it is in order to put pressure on the people to not vote for a corrupt official. But the stuff that they charge him with, basically bribery, trying to get better coverage in the media. I mean, that's a politician's job,
Right.
So they made it. They invented a crime that never existed on the books, and then they charge him with it. And they had the court made them change their charge sheet multiple times. It would be a mistrial in America, 2 seconds. Jurists like Alan Dershowitz, have been all over this, saying these aren't crimes. No prime minister in a Western country has ever been charged with things like this, and that this shouldn't even be a trial. But that doesn't stop it. They're doing the same thing to Trump. And the other thing that they're doing is that they use economics as a weapon. Right? Wars today are fought economically. And they don't just fight against nations economically, they fight against individuals economically. And the United States just passed an executive order about 2 weeks ago, now starting to sanction what they're calling violent settlers in Judea and Samaria.
I saw that. That's insane.
Yes.
That's
Now,
insane.
first of all, like violent settlers, if anybody knows the suburban residents in Judea and Samaria, they're like the sweetest people on earth. Okay. And you have some youth that basically push back when the army does not defend them against Palestinian terrorists that have done thousands and thousands of shooting attacks, rocket attacks, infiltrations into their communities, and they just like push back to say, like, don't attack into our town. And so now the U.S. is sanctioning, residents in Judea and Samaria who have never been convicted of a crime in an Israeli court. And because the banks in Israel do a lot of international transfers using SWIFT and other services, the United States has said by executive order that if the Israeli banks don't freeze their bank accounts, that those banks won't be able to participate in international bank transfers, which would essentially shut them down. So now you have the United States by executive order sanctioning Jewish residents in Judea and Samaria to the point where their Israeli bank accounts are now frozen. Okay, so this is all part of like a new economic warfare. You saw it in Canada with those trucker protests against Justin Trudeau's policies. What do? They freeze their bank accounts. They shut them off. They say, your money? Oh, that's not your money anymore. That's our money. You can't use it.
That's insane.
So this is, I think people should be very disturbed.
Yeah.
Believe me, they want to follow suit here on all of this. The idea is that the Western, this is what happens when midwits start running the countries in the West here. We have people like Justin Trudeau, Joe Biden, the various so-called leaders in Europe. They want the world to look at Israel and America, and of course Canada and Britain at one point, or all points, as the white oppressors, if you will, the colonizers. I believe that's the term they use. I heard pinkwashing earlier, so let's use some more of their terms here. But the idea is they can easily and conveniently make Israel look bad because they're the quote unquote white people, the oppressors in their tiny country, as compared to these large Arabic countries who are still, many of them, wallowed in the third world, to be honest with you.
Right. While Jews are the indigenous people in the state of Israel, the Jews are called the children of Israel, right?
But midwits don't know that. They only know what's on.
And not only that, but even the idea that it's like white occupiers or colonialists. I mean, more than half the country is come from descendants of Jews that were born in Muslim majority countries in the Middle East and North Africa. You have
Right.
Yemenites and
Yeah, they're not
Moroccans, and Persians and Egyptians and Syrians and Lebanese Jews and Jews
Right.
from
They're not even
everywhere.
remotely white.
You have
Yeah,
Ethiopian
exactly.
Jews here. Like, this country's not even white; it's a dark country, and
Right.
so every part of the narrative is a perversion.
It's all phony.
Absolutely.
It is all phony. We have a couple of minutes left. I guess I can do one quick one, Tony. Very
All right, one quick
here.
one, Chris.
All right. Speaking of Meathead, Rob Meathead Reiner's documentary "God and Country: The Rise of Christian Nationalism." Yeah, okay. You know where this was going. It was humiliated, opening at $38,000. That's right. That has to be terrible. Consider this, though. People who follow him love leftist propaganda in the movies, but they thought this might have been so boring that even the sheep wouldn't show up. What's your take?
So it's disappointing because Rob was trying to raise money so he could buy a Hunter Biden work of art. And I'm telling you right now, those things are worth a lot because people don't understand. It's not about the art; it's about the scratch and sniff aspect of this. If you actually get one of those, Chris, you scratch it, it smells like cocaine, prostitutes, and a little bit of Chanel No. 5 and Old Spice. It's quite the all-round room filler, if you know what I mean. So Rob was counting on the income from his movie to do that. It's very disappointing.
Well, most of the artwork. The only artwork that doesn't smell like what you say is the portrait he did of his dad, Joe. That smells like Depends. But that's a different story.
Oh,
Well, unused Depends don't smell bad until they're used. I think you're implying used Depends, Chris. Just let's be clear.
used
For the
Depends.
audience.
Yes.
Maybe. And
Maybe.
he needs a new pair of sneakers, by the way. I know there's a couple different designs that have just come out, but I'll get into that at another time.
Oh,
Yes,
we should send Joe Biden some Trump sneakers. What are they, like a couple $1,000s a pair? Isn't it something like that?
Well, it might help him
thing.
walk up and down Air Force One since he tripped again yesterday on the kids'
Yeah.
stairs twice.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yep.
so that's another story. So, Alex, thank you for putting up with us and hanging out here on the hard truth of this. We've really appreciated your helping us educate our audience. So, where can people find more about you and what you do?
Go online to jns.org, Jewish News Syndicate.
Great. So we'll put the post and links on when we post this audio and video. So look, please come back. We want to have you back after Rafa's done and we're kind of on the mend on you guys being able to move forward to secure your country. We appreciate everything you do to help inform people. And Chris, thank you for being here and running the board. And Elizabeth, always great to have you. So we'll be back next week with another episode of The Hard Truth of Tony Schaefer. Look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.